On episode 325 of the podcast, we are talking about a 3-part strategy on how to turn word of mouth into a strategy. Also, how to get clear on your who, and a huge mismanagement mistake that any video business owner could easily make. What is up, friend? Hey, it's Ryan Coral from Studio Sherpas, and this is the Grow Your Video Business podcast, the show for corporate and commercial filmmakers, where we talk about the business of production, sales, marketing, operations, sustainability, mindset, all of the things that, well, if you're a video business owner, probably all the things that you need in order to build a sustainable business. I am grateful to have been doing this work for 18 years. So I'm not here just like telling you, hey, do the things. Like, I'm doing these things in my business and trying to refine my business. And I've got multiple employees and we've done over $1 million a year multiple times. And it's not perfect, but we're doing it. And let's come along on this journey together and figure out how we can build better businesses so we can have a bigger impact in the world. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest today, Joana. But before we dive into this episode, quick question for you. Is your website helping or hurting your business? If you're not sure, then you need the Lead Machine. This is my free website checklist for corporate and commercial filmmakers. It is packed with insider tips and tricks that will help you identify common mistakes that people make on their websites that could be costing them business. And by making some simple tweaks and optimizations, you can start attracting more high quality leads and fill your funnel in no time. Guaranteed or your money back. Just kidding. It's a free download. It is my gift for you. And you can access it by going to studiosherpas.com/leadmachine. Do it and start improving your website today. Can't wait to see the amazing results that you get. Again, you can download it at studiosherpas.com/leadmachine. All right, now, seriously, let's get into this killer episode. I'm thrilled. You're gonna be thrilled. It's so good. What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to this episode. I am thrilled, even though this is like one of the earlier episodes I've ever recorded. I got my coffee in hand and just like ready to rock here. My amazing guest today is Joana Galvão, who is the co-founder. Did I do okay on that?
Yeah, great.
Okay, good. She is the co-founder of the award-winning design agency GIF Design Studios. She is based in Portugal with a team of 7, and her agency specializes in brand identities and conversion-obsessed design and serves industry leaders in 17 countries on 5 continents, at least of the recording of this, because it will probably be more soon enough. She's got a coaching program. I recently saw her hanging out with Chris Doe, who's a former podcast guest on this show, and it was introduced by Brian Hood, another past guest. And Joana, I am so just like your content, your heartbeat, like all of the stuff. I'm like, man, there's just like gold right here in front of me. So I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. And I'm so excited to be here too. After listening to your interview on the 6-Figure Creative podcast, I feel like we have a lot in common. So I'm excited for our chat.
I love it. So tell me, like, how did you, I was sharing with you like a little bit before we started this episode, just like my kind of journey into video and then eventually into like coaching and helping other filmmakers. What was your journey into design? Like, how did that start? And how did you get to a place where you have this like amazing, huge team and you just have some things figured out? And definitely one of the things I want to talk about here, it's in my notes, so I'm not going to forget, but you just have like a lot of bandwidth. You're on like maternity leave and your team is like running the show and like you're booking clients and delivering work and all of that stuff. So how did you do it?
Okay, so how can I make this succinct? How did I get into design firstly, right?
Yeah.
I loved it since I was a kid, but to be honest, like I didn't know, I've always been a creative. I just never knew what I would end up doing.
Yeah.
I almost went into film, actually.
Oh, wow.
Right? I even took a semester at NYU, Tisch.
Oh my.
For film.
Look at you.
I did film school.
Yeah.
But funny how like life but like people play a role in your life, sometimes bigger than you ever expected. But it was actually a teacher who was like, Joanna, you're much better at graphic design than you are at film. You should
Mm.
do graphic design as a degree. And I'm like, okay, if you say so. And that was kind of it.
What was your experience with graphic design? Like, were you just like, did you love drawing stuff, coloring? Like, what was?
Well, I just loved everything creative. When I played with Legos,
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
take photos of it
yeah,
and create books or
yeah.
stop motion animations.
Mhm.
Like whenever we had parties, I would spend hours designing on paint the invitations.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So whatever project, I would learn the skills that were needed to bring it to life. So that could have been film, that was writing, that was drawing, that was graphic design, I guess. Um, so yeah, that's how I fell into it. I just My teacher was like, "Oh, you're great at it." I think it's like also like the way you think of concepts and communicate
Yeah.
is really good. So that's how I ended up doing it as a degree.
And then, like,
And then I
at
just
what
started
point did?
following the path that was expected.
Yeah. Were you still a student when you actually charged somebody for some graphic design work, or when did that happen?
Well, the first client I consider like an official freelance client that wasn't like a family friend paying
Right.
me like for a dinner or whatever while I was studying
Yeah.
was after I was already working a full-time gig. Because while I was a student, I was actually a Zumba teacher, like an
Oh,
aerobics gym teacher.
yeah.
Yeah, so the first client actually was I was working at an agency full time, and I really loved it there.
Mhm.
My boss was really cool. The people I worked with were
Yeah.
really cool. The projects were awesome. I was learning a lot very quickly,
Yeah.
but I had an hour and a half commute to work. And that gives me a lot of thinking time, a lot
Yeah.
of consumption time. And I just, you go down a rabbit hole. You start with a magazine that leads you to checking out this person's website, that leads you to then following their YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera. And going down this rabbit hole, I stumbled upon Marie Forleo. I don't
Mm.
know if you've
Yeah.
heard of
Oh,
her,
yeah.
Ryan.
Absolutely.
She teaches people how to start their online business, and I was like, this is cool. This is cool. And in her launch for B School, she was throwing out a lot of student success stories,
Yeah.
and this was the first time that it hit me that, oh, this reality could be true for me too. I I identify with where she was at.
Mhm.
I want to be where she is now. So I guess B school is the answer if that's what she did. And that's how I started to think about the possibility of going freelance full time. And in one of her videos, she asks the question, finish this sentence, wouldn't it be great if?
Mm.
And I wrote, well, I've got nothing to lose. I wrote, wouldn't it be great if I magically started getting some freelance graphic design clients so that I could make the $2,000, I think it was, to join B school in 10 days, because that was when cart closed. Someone saw my comment, they emailed me, and they're like, I don't have $2,000, but I have $800. Does that buy me a logo? And I think the rest is history. I was just like, yes.
Mm.
Had you asked me how much I charge, I probably would have said $50,
Right.
100. I don't know. Um, so yeah, that was my first freelance project, was $800 for a logo
Yeah. I
from
love
someone who saw my comment on a video.
I love the audacity that you had or felt of like, I'm just gonna like put this out there. I do remember seeing Marie's stuff like forever ago, and then I remember seeing the price point of the program, and I was like, man, like that's just like, I don't know. And I think she was the very first person who I saw that was doing like online like education and like charging for it. And I was like, I love this idea, but like, geez. And she's just like the best, like just seems like an incredible human. But I was like, I don't have $2,000. Side note, or really what I wanted to say is the power in you being able to articulate what you wanted and just putting that out there, putting it out on the universe, putting that on social media, like whatever,
Yeah.
but like saying it, like, I just think that there's so much in that little thing right there, or seemingly little, I don't know what the law is or whatever, but it's like when you start thinking about it and then you start seeing like, oh my gosh, like there's it just starts becoming reality. And so I just think that's super cool.
No, yeah, it's played a huge role in my career. It's just, first, I guess we all need to get clear on what we want, first of all.
Yeah.
But secondly, it's just as important to vocalize it
Yeah.
and tell everybody. And it could be as simple as, for anyone who's listening, how many people know that you're currently looking for clients?
Yeah.
And how many people know the types of clients you're looking for? And how many people know what you're even charging, or what you even want to be charging? Because if you haven't said that to everybody, everybody in your network, you can't expect for things to, like, for these magic coincidences to happen, right?
Yeah.
And they're not magic. It's just like a question of like playing the odds.
Yeah.
The more throws you throw, I guess, the more hoops you'll land, like proportionately. So now I'm always like, okay, let me put it out there that, when I wanted to do public speaking, I would tell, like, at the end of every single conversation, whether with a client, whether with a partner we were collaborating with, whether at the end of a podcast interview, I'd be like, hey, by the way, I'm trying to get into speaking. Do you know anyone who has a stage or who has been on stage who could introduce me to someone? And so, yeah, big fan of putting it out there. Always.
I love that. So good. Okay, so you've got this first one, and it's sort of you're living the freelancer dream. At what point what was the impetus to hire somebody? Like, were you just like overloaded with design work, or did you just want to like build a team and have other creatives to work with? Like, what was the driving factor to hire your first person?
Ryan, I wish I had kept a journal of my thoughts throughout this whole thing, because I feel like it all happened so fast that I wasn't the conscious mastermind behind it all. It just happened to me. So I think deep down, I always envisioned having a design agency, because I remember my husband saying like, oh, but that's your dream. Let's make it happen now. So I must have already had that in the back of my mind. I just never really knew when that would happen. And I wasn't really in a particular rush. I mean, I was 22 when I made my first hire. So, but then I remember it was when, like, another cool story of my career is that I started to reach out to people I wanted as clients cold. These were people who had big email newsletters and were already, like, probably already had designers and things like that. But I was just emailing everybody just so they were aware of who I was and what I did. Not even pitching about my work, just like saying, hey, I loved your newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. And one of them, Selena Sue, she became a dear friend over time. She replied and she's like, actually, Joanna, my graphic designer called in sick and I have a sales page that needs finished for like two days from now. So I pulled an all-nighter. I made the sales page happen. And now I was in her radar. A couple of weeks later, she puts out a post on Facebook and asks, I'm looking for a volunteer to come help me in my high-level mastermind in New York. And I emailed her. I'm like, me? I will do anything. Nothing is beneath my pay grade. I will fly myself out there. I will book myself in for the hotels. And I can even be your photographer, because my degree was graphic design with photography. And I remember she thought it was very weird. It was like, why would you come? She was like, it's a free gig, right? I'm not paying you. And I told her, I was like, yes. And I will be very professional and work really hard. But I know that just being around you, I'll end up learning a lot. Just like shadowing you for a week, like what a privilege, like what an opportunity. So she was very happy about it. I was very happy about it, and ended up being a win-win. And I think it was then, when I was learning from her, that she started asking me questions about my business. I mean, she's a business coach. So she was like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And I'm like, well, I'm booked out 6 months in advance. And now that I'm getting on calls with new leads, no one wants the slot that is 7 months from now. So
Right.
I'm like leaving a lot of people unhappy, and what do I do? And she helped me put out my first job description and job ad that I
Mm.
posted somewhere. I don't remember
Yeah.
where.
Yeah. Craigslist.
And so I think it was like a mix of her guidance. My husband as well was like, "Why do you start getting help? Because you're leaving work on the table." And yeah,
I love it.
that was how I started hiring.
And so you have 7 full-time employees, and like, do you have a studio? Like, does everybody work out of the same place, or what does that look like?
Well, this is like where like an interesting conversation for the current times,
Right?
right? We did get an office right from the get-go, and everybody did work from the
Yeah.
office. Um, but now everybody is like, we had one, my ops manager, she just did a month in Berlin, and one of my designers did a month in Croatia. Another designer, she got pregnant and she's like, I want to move back to my hometown, but I don't want to stop working.
Oh, yeah.
So can we just go remote? And now it's like our office people go in whenever, but it's like still, we still need to define it better. Like, are we keeping it? Are we
Yeah.
going fully remote? But we do have a physical office.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. That's like it's such a funny thing, because we're sort of in that same thing. Like pre-pandemic, I was so about building a good culture, and that's like, you have to be in person for that, like, good culture. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's just a different kind of culture, or way of approaching your work, or connecting, or whatever. So yeah, post, it's like, man, like, we just hired a project manager who's fully remote, but a core part of our team. And so, we're like, well, we did this before when the pandemic happened. We were all working from home. Everybody was, we were just hopping on Zooms and got used to chatting with each other. And, but after the fact, it's like, oh, okay, like, let's see, because we could have hired local and found somebody that's like, yeah, that's fine. Or we could like hire the best and they're not local. So like, yeah, we think that this is probably like worth pursuing.
Yeah. And how are you finding it?
Well, she's like 4 days in, so far so good.
Okay. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm like, do I
Yeah,
love it? Do I
yeah,
hate it? I mean, personally, at the moment, I have no choice but to work from home
yeah,
because I have a 2-month-old. I'm
yeah,
still breastfeeding, so it's like I need this
yeah,
flexibility, and I want to offer that flexibility to my team. But I do miss it a lot, and I do see that at times it can cause some communication
yeah, yeah.
issues or just like motivational issues, or it's like we're not there to help elevate each other's work
Right.
as much as we would we be in person. Yet on the flip side, we might all be more productive.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, it's like, it's just so interesting to think about. Like, we've had this gift for decades and decades of like, we work together, and like, that's just the way it is. Not that it's right or wrong, right? Because some professions, if you're a writer or something like that, you probably don't like write in public. You probably got to find a quiet place. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it's just, it is interesting navigating. One thing that we're going to be doing, we're going to fly Grace in to do like probably like a 2-day hangout with the team to just try to build some synergy. And then each quarter she'll come in, because we'll do like our all day EOS meeting, where it's just kind of like team, like, goal planning and that sort of thing. And so I think it will be sort of similar, where we'll get like a day with the full team and then a day with the leadership team, at least once a quarter. And she's flying from Dallas, so flights are actually pretty inexpensive from Dallas to Detroit. But yeah, and she's built for it. There are some people that aren't built for remote work. They really need to be in the presence of other people and have that accountability and just that like motivation. And some people are like, my life is better when I go to work because I like being around people, or I need to escape, right? I've got kids running around the house, and I need something different. so there is that too. I think it just depends.
Yeah. And like I'm sure we're now that the whole world is going through this, because before the pandemic, we had a lot of clients that had their team fully remote, and the guys at Basecamp, I don't know if you've read their work,
Oh yeah,
but their
yeah,
latest book, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at
yep,
Work.
yep.
I definitely
So
recommend
good.
the read.
Yeah,
They love it and they make it work for them. But I'm interested in seeing like the studies that come out of this
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
research or the effects that it also has on our psychology and our mental health
Yep.
or emotional health, because I'm seeing that because we don't have that, like even the commute, I think
Yeah.
is a healthy thing,
Yes.
even though
Oh
we
my gosh.
all think it's time wasted. It's like meditative
Yep.
time, which
Totally.
is good for our brains. So yeah, I
Decompressing,
wonder like
all of that stuff. I remember like I realized I don't know how many weeks into the whole thing where I was like, oh my gosh, like I think it was my Audible credits started growing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not finishing books. I would easily finish a book in a month, but I had like
yeah.
3 credits, and I actually put my Audible on pause for the first time in like 8 years because I was like, I don't know, like why isn't this happening? It's like, oh, my commute. I'm not driving to the studio and back. It's pretty wild. Hey, I want to hear about this. Like, you sort of had I think a mass exodus with your team at some point, and am I
Yeah.
recalling the story correctly here?
Yes.
Maybe some
So
mistakes were made or something to learn
mistakes
from.
and leadership. Yeah. So the thing about starting a business at 22 is you haven't been around the workforce long enough to
Mm,
have even observed how things worked. Like I wasn't long enough at a company to even witness somebody being onboarded or offboarded or
yeah,
someone quit. Like
yeah,
I had zero
yep.
experience. And I also yeah, I was just very naive. I made so many mistakes in
Yeah.
my first year. So, mistake number one that I made was hiring people younger than I was because I thought that no one would take me seriously as a boss if they were older than me. Huge mistake. So
Mm,
many upsides with
yeah.
hiring people
Wow.
more experienced, because they'll actually end up bringing a lot of knowledge to your business and
Yeah.
teaching you how
Imagine
things
that.
should be done, which is
Mhm.
what happened when I hired my ops manager. But at the time, I had 2 designers, and they were both younger than me, so a year younger. So just out of university, I was their first job. And, I made a lot of mistakes as a leader and as a boss, but I didn't understand them until later. So I noticed that whenever I came in the office, it was starting to feel increasingly tense between the 3 of us. Like they'd be chatting, then I'd come in and they'd be quiet,
Oh,
and I was like, I
oh,
had that gut feeling. I was like,
oh
there's
no.
something wrong here.
Yeah.
They started not to want to, because we would go out for lunch as the 3 of us. They started to be like, oh no, we're having lunch
Oh
here, or
my
like,
gosh.
well, we're
I'm
going
having
home for lunch and all the
flashbacks.
things.
Yes.
I'm like, something's wrong. And I
Yeah.
remember telling my husband, I'm like, something's wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not even enjoying coming into the office, but
Ugh.
like, and he's like, it's all in your head. It's all in your head. Until one day they came to me, and they both, actually, like a couple of days before that, let me rewind.
Yeah.
I did all my books by hand, you know, and Ryan, this is my version of doing the books.
Oh no.
Here's like all the money that I know came in. I would know this by heart, right? I didn't even like the business was so new. I'm like, okay, well, this client paid this much,
Right,
da, da, da.
right.
And this is all the money that I'm yet to receive. Books done.
Done,
And I
done,
had it
and
on a piece of
done.
paper.
You should make an app, and that's it. Like, just like that is amazing.
So then it had like a big number, and I think at the time we were making like $10,000 a month
Yeah.
as an agency.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so that's that. And I left it on the table.
Oh shoot.
And then it was
Oh
gone.
gosh.
And I'm like, where's the girls, have you seen a paper with numbers on? And they're like, no, we don't go on your near your desk. And then I go for lunch and I come back and it's on my table. I'm
Oh
like, oh
boy. Oh
God.
gosh.
I'm
No.
like, oh, you guys found it. What do you mean? We don't go to your desk. Like,
Oh
okay, great.
jeez.
You're not
I'm
telling
so
me.
uncomfortable right now.
So then a couple of weeks later, like they call a meeting, both of them,
Mm-mm.
and they're like, Joanna, we've been thinking. We are working for American clients. We're based out of Portugal. We did some research in San Francisco. A junior designer gets paid like 3,000 a month. So that's what we want. They must have done the math, like 3,000 for me, 3,000 for her. That's still 4 grand that
Yep.
Joanna pockets at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what? And at the time, they were receiving 1,000 euros, which is very generous for a Portuguese salary. This is what we need to keep in mind. Like, it was a very generous salary. They probably wouldn't have gotten that as a junior straight out of university anywhere else at the time.
Yep.
Today, the landscape's probably different.
Sure.
And I'm like, wait, you want me to triple your salary for no reason, just because you saw the numbers that we were making? It was also like, the three of us, we're all so naive. Like, how are we? And so I said, no, I can't. And then I had a meeting with them individually, and to one of them, I'm like, okay, well, to you, because you have shown like that you can turn around work very quickly and you have been improving, the design output has been better and better, I can increase your salary to this. And to the other one, I said, I can't. So I will keep the salary as is, or you can leave if you want. So they're both like, okay, no, we choose to leave. And they didn't give me any notice, because at the time we were still I was still hiring them on a freelance basis. And because we were doing all the legal stuff, like, they knew long-term plan was to get a contract in place. We already had it drafted out. They had already read it. And we were about to sign it. Like, we had just legalized our business as like a company. But because they hadn't signed it yet, they were just like, nope, we're out. Okay. And so suddenly I went from having 2 designers to 0. And I had all these clients. I remember Lewis House was the client at the time.
Oh
He
my
was like
gosh.
our biggest client.
Jeez.
And we were on retainer with him. And I was like,
No big deal.
Lewis, I'm so sorry. I just lost my team overnight. I don't know what to do. There's no way I can do all the work that we need to do for your brand. Like, what can I do? Like, I need to figure this out. And he was like, don't worry, Joanna. Like, well, like, you just, let's hit pause. We'll figure it out on your end. You figure it out on your end. Like, let us know if you need anything. And so that's what happened. Now it got a little bit worse, where I got an email from a client of mine that they were CC'd under, or that I was CC'd in her reply to them, which was like, oh, thank you for pitching work to me, but like, more important than your talent is your integrity, and you clearly have none, because you're going behind Joanna's back and pitching your work as cheaper. So thanks, but no thanks. So that's what they did. Like, they quit, the 2 of them, at the same time.
Goodness.
And they contacted, I don't know, I have no idea if they did this to more than the one client.
Yeah.
But to this client, they were like, we just quit Joanna's agency and we can do the same work for a little bit cheaper. But in reflection, in everything I did for them, for it to get to that point, I realized a lot of things that I did wrong. Like, I micromanaged. I was always looking over their shoulder at what they were doing and be like, oh, I wouldn't choose that color. Like, that must have been horrible.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to do my best. I just wanted the design to be aligned. Like, I gave them no creative freedom. I would interrupt their projects, because I would just get off the phone with a client and be like, oh no, this is for tomorrow, so stop what you're doing, do this instead. They later shared with me that they didn't like the fact that they were working facing a wall. I'm like, oh great, you could have told me that. We could have moved tables around. That would have been so simple. But that was the mistake, is that I never created a safe environment for feedback. I never gave them the space. I never asked them, what can we be doing better, until they quit, right? And then the other thing that one of them shared with me later on is that we were still operating under my name and not under an agency name. So the minute we were back to it just being me, I hired someone and I was like, okay, great. Let's work on the name. Let's work on a new website. Let's have an entity for what this agency is. And then I just started asking for feedback always. We still do, like twice a year or quarterly sometimes. Just like, what can we be doing better? What do you want changed? How are you feeling? So that's that story.
Oh man, I'm taking notes here. This is yeah, I'm remembering my first full-time hire, and there was a moment where I realized like something is different in the air, and
Mm,
there were like 2 or 3 people kind of huddling together, and I'm like this is weird. This isn't like what I set out to build. And then some months later, after two of the culprits were gone, I remember pulling into the parking lot and just like breathing this like sigh of relief, and just felt like this heavy weight lifted off my
yeah.
shoulders. And I'm like, okay, now I can start rebuilding the team that I want. And at that time, Jason Fried, what was the book?
Mm. Rework.
Yes, rework. And in that, I remember, sort of being introduced to culture, and,
Yeah.
in really starting to think about core values, and being able to cast that vision, right, to people that would be interested in working there, or people that already were, and sort of just a reminder of like, hey, this is who we want to be. Like, we don't want to be, we're not teaming up against, we're here together. And so to your point exactly, creating that open line of communication is so important, because if you're not asking, a lot of times people are just like, well, she's my boss, he's my boss. Like, I don't have the audacity. Like, who am I to like go to them and say like, we should move our desks or whatever. I'm trying to be very clear we've got 2 new hires, and I'm trying to tell them like, listen, we've been doing stuff a certain way for a long time. So please take notes when you're like, this is like
Yeah.
clunky, it's taken way too long, I don't like it, it doesn't feel good, like any of that stuff, like please we want to be constantly reiterating and becoming better and more efficient for our clients, but also for each other. Like if we can
Mhm.
become better, like let's do it. And I can't keep dreaming up what I think you need. You need to come to me, or you need to come to, the person that manages you, and share, like be open, and it's okay.
Yeah. And I love that because you have a new set of fresh eyes on your
Yeah.
process.
Yes.
And even if if anyone listening here is like, oh, but I don't have a team, so I guess that doesn't apply to me. But like, you can revisit the way you do things all the time and think back to like, okay, let me look at how I onboard my clients. Could anything have been done quicker? Could
Mhm.
anything have been optimized so it takes me less time, or could anything be templatized, or could this experience be better in any way? Is
Yeah.
there anywhere where I can add more moments of delight for the client? Like there's always things to be improved on. Like when we recently revisited our systems, I did a questionnaire for the team on a Google Doc. Like really granular. Like,
Mhm.
what do you think of the questionnaire we send our clients? What questions give you the most juice for the work that you do? What questions are irrelevant? Do you like the design of our type form? What could be better? Do you have
Mhm.
any ideas? Like, it was really that to really make them think
Yeah.
and contribute to like every single process part of the process. And we just like as a team, we just revamped it all. But again, could probably get improved on in a couple of months' time again
Yeah.
if we wanted to revisit.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. That's why I feel like we've got 2 new hires, and I'm like, I just told the team the other day, I'm like, it makes me so. I mean, it's like there was some shakeup, and it was like these are 2 kind of key roles in our company, but I'm
Yeah.
also so excited because of having fresh perspective, and just bringing something new to the table. Of like, there will be things that will surface that we're like, oh my gosh, like we haven't even thought about that or considered that. Let's look at it. Let's change it. Let's make it better. So very
Yeah.
excited about that. I
But it's hard, right? Right? Like
Oh my
even now
gosh.
as you tell your story and as I'm reminiscing on the story, I'm like, why do I have a team? This is like the hardest part of entrepreneurship. But
Hmm.
then it's also like the best part.
Yeah.
Like with a team we can achieve so much more. We can create such a bigger
Yeah.
impact. We can have more fun as well. But
Yeah.
it is very, very difficult to, well, one thing is for sure, you'll never be able, or at least from experience, I don't think I'll ever be able to create a culture where everybody's happy 100% of the time,
Right. Right.
and they're just like any relationship, work relationships or complicated, just like personal relationships, and
Yeah.
there will always be ups and downs and ebbs and flows.
Yep. Although my wife is happy 100% of the time. Just
You'll have to tell me
kidding.
your secret.
Yeah, right. I'm curious, is there a quick story on how you landed Lewis Howes as a client? Because that's like pretty incredible, and I don't want to gloss over that.
Yeah, it's not glamorous. It's well, actually, it was pretty fun. I went to a retreat in the Philippines, where he was a speaker at, but it was a 50-person retreat for 4 days.
Oh.
So all the
Oh, wow.
speakers and all the attendees were in the same resort.
Yeah.
And we all went for lunch together and dinners together. And after the event, we'd all go hang out in the pool and play volleyball and drink cocktails. So you had so much access to these speakers that it's like I spent 4 days with Lewis Howes in the Philippines with 50 other entrepreneurs
gosh.
too, but like we all got to know each other by name, and so yeah, I guess he got to know my story, and I was really young and starting out, and actually I had met Lewis before so sorry to keep
Yeah, fine.
rewinding, but the first time I met Lewis Howes was at Selena Sue's business party,
Oh, okay.
where at the end of that internship that I did for her
Yeah.
for free, or however we want to call it, she invited me she's like, I don't want you to be my assistant for this party. Come as my guest and I'll get an assistant for the party. And Lewis Howes was at that party, and she was like, here's Joanna. She's my graphic designer. And like Lewis, she introduced me to a bunch of incredible people who then became clients. But it wasn't until a few months later that I was at this event in the Philippines with Lewis Howes that I was speaking to him about, like, I don't know how to grow this business. Like, I'm trying to land retainer clients. And he was like, I'll be a retainer client. I have design needs all the time. And so he negotiated with me a rate. He negotiated pretty hard, because he was like, I know that I could help your business, so you're gonna have to help me with mine. And so he got a really, really good deal. But also we got great opportunities from it.
Yeah.
So it was a win-win.
I love that. Okay. I really like the knowing, seeing you with Chris and listening to your episode with Brian. One of the things that I know that you're really good at and that you could speak into is how to book dream client, how to get fully booked. I think it's one of the biggest struggles, as a video business owner, the feast or famine lifestyle that we become accustomed to. And we kind of settle in like, this is just how it's going to be. I'm only going to be able to look for new clients when I deliver my most recent project and I can take a breath, but I'm taking a half breath because I got to start reaching out to clients. I got to, meetings, whatever the things are. And then we book another gig and it's back to like production. And then, it's just like this ebb and flow of like, golly, it's hard to build a sustainable business with that rhythm. So what have you done? What have you found? What can you share with us to maybe do that less and maybe to create some opportunities for some predictability or something, some more sustainability where it doesn't always require us to be doing all of the things?
Sure. And we have how long together?
3 days. Let's go to the Philippines and we'll host a retreat.
But I can definitely give you the big picture overview. But you touched upon it. I feel like there are things to it. It's one of the pieces is how to land dream clients.
Yeah.
Then it's like how to do it consistently. And then the other is like the sustainable, like creating a sustainable business, right? So I believe in, let's think about if you were to hire an architect to build a new home, right?
Yeah.
Would you go on, and maybe I'm asking this question in the leading way, but would you go on Google or would you ask your friend who just remodeled their house, who you like the house, like
Absolutely.
Who's your architect?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy? So just like that example, a lot of people go to their trusted network
Yeah.
and be like, hey, I'm looking to get this video done. Who did yours? Or do you know anyone? And did you like the experience? So I like to turn word of mouth into a strategy. It's
Mm.
funny because like with Brian, he's like, you should not rely on word of mouth. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
you shouldn't rely on it in the sense of like, let me sit back on my sofa
Right.
and wait for the
Yes.
introductions to come my way. You have to be proactive about it. But it's quite simple. The more people know about who you are, what you do, and for whom, the more likely it is that they'll send work your way. So we need to work on that, and it's like a three-factor thing. It's for you to get more consistent word of mouth referrals. You need to consider volume. So how many people know about who you are, what you're doing for whom?
Mhm.
Like just and if right now that pool of people is very small, you need to like make a conscious effort of growing it every single day. Then we need to think of depth. So how close are you to those people? Like, do they know, like, and really trust you to send people your way? Or are they just aware that you exist because they met you once and they grabbed your business card at a conference and you're hoping that that's enough for them to
Right.
remember you a year from now when they come across a good lead? No, you need depth with them. You need to nurture that relationship. You need to keep checking in. You need to keep deepening that relationship so you stay top of mind so that they know, like, and trust you. And so that when they do come across a lead, right? Because in our business, it's not we need to meet people when they need our service.
Right.
We don't need video every day.
Right.
So I feel like we need to work extra hard to stay top of mind on a lot of people's minds
Yeah.
so that when they do come across the person at the right time
Yep.
that needs video, they can put you in contact.
Joanna, can I
So it's
just,
volume.
yep.
Yeah.
I just want to say like that, what you just said there, staying top of mind. It's sort of like, okay, like what do I need to do? I remember 10 years ago, 11 years ago when we launched our corporate brand, we had been doing wedding films and I had created an email list. I don't know what spurred me on to say like, hey, we should have an email list and set on a monthly email. But I did, and I maintained it, and we did pretty well, like staying top of mind. But then we launched this corporate brand, and so many of the weddings that we had done, like the previous 5 years, were for like high end luxury, like very successful people who own businesses or were executives at like big businesses or like had tons of family money. So I just said, hey, FYI, we just launched this, Tell Studios. We're doing work with corporations, nonprofits, whatever, telling these stories similar to wedding work, just like, business stories. That day, I got an email from one of our clients, my first year in business, and her name's Andrea, same as my wife, different person. And she said, oh my gosh, we were just in a meeting this morning with my team. She worked at a PR firm, and she said, and somebody said, we need a video. Would you work with us? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So fast forward 11 years later, we are still doing work we did $60,000 of work that year with that client. That was a massive amount of money for us. Like I was used to booking $5,000, $10,000 weddings, and for us to get $60,000 from one client, and that was the first year, hundreds of thousands of dollars of work from this client because, to your point exactly, right place, right time. I sent this newsletter, and it was that day that she made that connection. And but she knew I filmed her wedding. Like she loved her wedding video, but
Yeah.
I wasn't an interface. I
She
wasn't
had
saying
already
like,
forgotten or she
totally.
didn't know you did that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my gosh. So that I, again, don't want to gloss over that. Super, super important. Okay, continue.
Oh, I love that example. So it's all about like, okay, well, because there's no algorithm, there's no funnel for like, how do we find that person at the right time, like right after they just had that
Right.
meeting? So the best next thing is to like work on like your network. So volume, depth, and then alignment. And in your case is actually like an example of how it worked, even though it wasn't in alignment, because you wanted to do corporate videos, but your list was from
Yeah.
your wedding videos.
Yep.
So that's where I'd be like, okay, well, if you're looking to go to corporate and all your network is in the wedding industry, that's not in alignment. Now you need to start meeting more people in the corporate world. But
Right.
of course, your clients all have careers.
Yeah.
But let's say your network was just like wedding caterers
Right.
and wedding DJs and all of that. Those, it's like, okay, well, that's not going to work anymore to bring in the clients that you want. So let's work on knowing the right people,
Mhm.
right? So like your strategic partnerships,
Yep.
meeting the right people who could bring in clients. So yeah, I think it's like working on those three things. And if you are busy with client work, if you're in the middle of like a project, like a week long shoot, just carve out 30 minutes,
Yeah.
15 minutes every single morning to let me look at the list of people who I know. Do I need to add more people to that list? Um, if yes, let me like try and do some cold emails or ask my current network to introduce me to people. Like
Mhm.
I asked Brian to make a lot of intros. Like he introduced me to you and now we're here.
Look at us.
Um, or do you need to just like reach back out to some people who haven't
Yeah.
heard from you for a long time? And on the cold email, actually, we have a bunch of templates, Ryan. Like if you want to share with your audience,
Yeah,
we give them out for free.
for
But it
sure.
was inspired by Delia, who's now a very close friend. We're actually looking to start a podcast together.
Oh, fun.
But a year and a bit ago, she wrote me a cold email, and from that cold email asking like, does your agency need copywriters? Essentially, it was much better written
Yeah.
than that. um, and that exact email is in
Oh
our
my
free
gosh.
email
Yeah.
templates. But she did the math, and from that one email, between the business that she does with us and the business that we sent her way from our clients, in a year it was worth like 60,000 US dollars.
Mhm.
That one email.
Wow. Funny story. Yesterday, I reached out to that same Andrea. Uh, she's at a new agency, and I was just like, "Hey, I wanted to see if we can get lunch, catch up." And she messaged
Yeah.
back. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like let's totally do it." So you got to do that. If you were
Yeah.
out of these different depth, alignment, volume, if you were starting from scratch, you had no list, and like maybe you had done a couple of projects for a couple of different clients, like where would you spend your time? Like what would you say, like where have you netted the most results in like one of those areas or practices?
If I was starting out, I think the best thing to do is get very clear on the type of client you would love to land.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, no, I'll just take any client,
Right.
I'm happy with weddings or brand stories or documentaries, then you don't know where to search. Like you don't even have to get married to like that niche or that client avatar, but just get clear on like who you want as a first client. So if I was starting out and I'd be like, okay, I have no clients, but I really want a restaurant, I would Google how to start a restaurant, how to market your
Mm.
restaurant. And I would start seeing like who has a podcast on it
Oh
that
yeah.
I could pitch myself as a guest to, who's a business coach that already has an audience of restaurant owners who I could potentially introduce myself to and be like, hey, I'm a brand new freelancer. Um, I might be a little bit more affordable for your clients than the others because I'm just getting started. So I need some work in my portfolios to be able to raise my prices. Like, can I help your clients at all? Can I come give a master class to
Mhm.
your coaching program? So yeah, I would just like Google. I'd think about what would these restaurant owners be googling, do the same, and start to understand their industry and who they're following, and try and get in front of those people.
I love that. That's brilliant, because I think what you're doing there is we call it finding a channel partner, somebody that has access to a bunch of our ideal clients. So my encouragement is
Yeah.
always like, hey, get plugged into an association or a network group that is like full of your ideal client. But man, like if you have the mindset, and so many of the people I coach and talk to, it's like, I'm afraid to niche down because then, I'm going to lose out on opportunities. But to your point, like you can't just like sit back and wait for people to follow you or not follow you, but to reach out and to hire you. That stuff will happen. Just like naturally, it probably will. Not at the level that you want or need. So you have to do some outbound, you got to do some work. And that
Yeah.
means if you can identify a segment then you can understand their specific pain points and their struggles. And then when you talk to them or send them a cold email, it's not just like, hey, reaching out to see if you need any video production services, hit me up. It's like, that's like so generic and that doesn't resonate. But if you say, hey, I work with video production companies that don't have the time to tell their own story, I can come in and do it like this. And here's a result of, 2 other video companies that I've helped and how they're seeing, the success of. It's like, oh, wow, you're speaking exactly to my pain. I don't have time. My team, we're too busy doing client work. So, but if you're telling me that I should have a marketing piece of my team. I already know that, but I'm like, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the time, like whatever. But you do that, that's your specialty. It's like you're singing my song. That doesn't even make any sense, but sing me a song.
But then, and on that, like the other thing you can think about when making that first cold email is that cold email doesn't have to be the email where you pitch yourself. That cold email could just be an email to get the conversation started, to get your name familiar in that person's inbox. So, Ryan, let's say I really wanted to get on this podcast and I didn't know anybody who had been on it. And I thought of you as like, oh, like Ryan's never going to reply to me if I pitch myself. Like who am I in Ryan's world? I might just like find another angle to get a conversation going and be like, oh, I see you have a 13-year-old daughter. Like, how's this going for you? Or, like maybe that sounds like a creepy, like I'd have to find a better example, but like my coach, Matthew Kimberly, he says, if you wanted to get a conversation started with Richard Branson, you might say something like, oh, read your book, great book, inspired me to launch my own airline. By the way, like, where do you get airline fuel from? Just like the idea is that like you start with a compliment, you show them that this is not a generic email you've blasted out to a million people, and you ask a question that is very quick for them to reply.
Yep.
It's not like you don't ask a question. Like I get this all the time in my DMs. Like, what was the number one business lesson? I'm like, oh my gosh, like
how much time do I got here?
I don't know. Go listen to a couple of podcasts where I share a lot of business lessons. But if they tell me like, oh, so cool, like I listened to your podcast, you briefly mentioned, how like you email people every day, like who's your email provider? I'm like, oh, okay, well, I use Gmail, but now I've replied to them. I have a conversation thread. Maybe they reply like, gee, thanks. Like, thank you so much for replying. I never thought, and that could start slowly. And maybe a month from now, they'll do a pitch, but I'll open it and it'll be a little bit warmer because I've already spoken to them about something else.
Yeah, I was going to say there's this, we get voiceover people emailing all the time. Like, hey, I'm open for work. And I hardly ever respond. I normally just forward them to my producer and whatever. But there's this one lady who has messaged me so many times, and I respond, and every time I'm like, oh gosh, like, but she's asking me questions. She's not just like, oh, I listened to this episode, like that was cool, like, tell me your whole life story, what's your biggest regret, whatever, but like very specific, quick, and so the emails that I send her are very, very short, but she is doing such a good job of like trying to connect, staying top of mind, and I mean, she's doing exactly what you're saying by not trying to go too deep, but like she's so friendly. I feel bad not responding to her, right? And so I just do it. I do it as fast as I can. But when I think of like all the female voiceover people that we've ever worked with, she's the only one that I can remember. I can't give you any other names or whatever. And just like, man, it's working. So we need to figure out how to do that for ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when you start to get a lot of those, like, we've got a database of, like over 200 freelancers now who are like, oh, in case your agency ever needs an animator or this or that. And then when it comes to actually when we need one, we're like, wait, who can we ask again? Like, the task suddenly feels overwhelming because we've got like this huge database. Yep. But, if someone had stayed top of mind like that, maybe they would have gotten the gig.
Yeah. Oh, Joanna, I've got I probably have like 7 more questions on here. We have to wrap. Like, we have to wrap this up. Will you come back on? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say you'll just have to bring me on and we'll continue the conversation.
I'm so mad I had to do this, but I think less is more. I think, wait, is that how you say it? Yeah, people are going to be hungry for more. I'm hungry for more. Where can people, like, do you have, I know you have these email templates. Where can they find that, or how can they follow along with all the cool stuff that you guys are doing?
So the best place to go is theambitiouscreatives.com/grow your video business. And that's where you can grab the email templates. And I've also thrown in the link to my Instagram because I try and reply to all the DMs. So if you're on Instagram, just let me know you've listened to this. Ask me any questions if you want. And I'll be sure to reply.
Amazing. Joanna, this has been just a treasure. Thank you so much. I'm so just excited, proud of you for the success that you've had and just the way that you're showing up. I think that you've learned a lot from the very influential people that you've been hanging out with, and I can just see why you've experienced a lot of the success that you have. So thank you for sharing with us today, and I'm grateful to now know you and not just be like such a fanboy and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's going to be on my show, but here you are, we did it, and just really, really grateful.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. This is really fun.
All right, friend, for access to the show notes from this episode, you can download them or see them at studiosherpas.com/325, because this was the 325th episode of the show. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or somewhere else on the planet, you can leave a comment. Let me know what your biggest takeaway is. Because here's the thing, if you just listen, if you're just a consumer and you're not like, okay, how can this benefit me? How can this help me? You're not thinking like that. I want to challenge you to start thinking like that. And part of that would be, what can I start, or what can I stop, or what can I do as a result of what I learned, heard, or even a random thought that came to mind as I was listening to this episode that had nothing to do with this episode, but that could make my life or business better. Would love to know what that might be. It could be a great way for you to even get a little bit of accountability as you throw that out into the internet verse, the multiverse. Okay, it's not the multiverse, but you get what I'm saying. Don't forget to get access to the lead machine at studiosherpas.com/lead machine. See what we did there? Trying to make it simple. Reach out if you need anything. You can always email me, ryan@studiosherpas.com. And I'll see you on next week's episode, or I'll see you online or something like that. Anyway, thank you for being with me today. Appreciate you so much. And give Joanna a shout if you thought her episode was so good. Seriously, she is crushing it, and what an awesome treat to have her on the show today. Okay, that's it. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.